They say the West was built on tall tales, but the American Film Institute's list pulls no punches. These are the Westerns that rewrote Hollywood's rules and torched the myth of the frontier, ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about heroes, villains, and the raw nerve it takes to survive. Which classics stand tall, and which icons get shot down before the credits roll? Grab your seat, because before it's over, even die-hard fans will be second-guessing their favorites. Stagecoach, 1939. Before Stagecoach, the Western was a cheap B-movie playground, quickie odors with dime store sets and cartoonish shootouts. Then John Ford rolled in with a camera, Monument Valley, and a vision. Ford didn't just want to make a Western, he wanted to elevate the genre into pure cinema. His gamble? Cast John Wayne, a has-been leading man, at the center of a movie teeming with outcasts, drunks, and dubious souls, all trapped in a stagecoach rumbling toward Lordsburg. Halfway through the journey, Wayne's Ringo Kid appears in an iconic tracking shot, rifle in hand, fate written across his face, and the entire landscape of Hollywood Westerns change in a single frame. Suddenly, the genre had weight, psychology, and moral ambiguity. Orson Welles watched Stagecoach over 40 times before making Citizen Kane, using it as his personal film school. But Ford's real genius is in the details. A gambler hiding old wounds, a prostitute shunned by respectable women, a drunken doctor. Everyone on that coach is running from something. The real tension isn't Indian attacks or bandits. It's the uneasy alliances inside that creaking, dust-choked stage. Even the film's flaws, the now controversial portrayal of Native Americans, can't erase its technical brilliance and emotional charge. Stagecoach earned 7 Oscar nominations and won 2, but its real legacy is in its DNA. This was the moment the Western grew up. John Wayne wasn't just a gunslinger, he was the Western incarnate. Monument Valley wasn't just a backdrop, it became the West itself. Without Stagecoach, there's no modern action movie, no Ford Wayne legend, and no roadmap for how to turn pulp into poetry. This is where the myth of the American West truly began. My Darling Clementine, 1946. In a genre built on hard men and harder choices, John Ford's My Darling Clementine stands out for its almost aching gentleness. The setup looks familiar: Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, the OK Corral, and the Shadow of Vengeance. But Ford isn't interested in the gunfight. He's transfixed by the quiet moments in between. Henry Fonda's Wyatt Earp isn't the steely lawman of legend. He's exhausted, uncertain, and achingly human, more likely to rest on a porch than draw a gun. The film's heart isn't in the shootout. It's in the longing glances between Earp and the schoolteacher Clementine, in Doc Holliday's slow unraveling from gambler to doomed romantic, and in the gentle domestic rhythms that Ford weaves between standoffs. Fonda, tall, lean, quietly magnetic, plays Earp as a man who wants to belong but is always on the outside looking in. Ford's camera lingers on empty streets, sunrises, and tiny gestures, a barber's chair, a shy smile, a church bell. Critics of the day were divided, but modern cinephiles hail My Darling Clementine as Ford's most poetic Western. It's less about the myth and more about the ache that myth leaves behind. Even the showdown at the OK Corral is stripped of bravado and glory, just men, guns, and a relentless sense of fate. Roger Ebert called it one of the sweetest and most good-hearted of all Westerns. And he's right. Ford was chasing a lost America, a place where decency survives amid chaos, where love is possible even at the end of a gun barrel. In this film, the West is less a place and more a yearning, and no movie ever ached for it quite like this. Red River, 1948. Red River doesn't open with a gunfight or a galloping posse. It starts with a vision, a river, a ranch, and a gruff-obsessed John Wayne building an empire from nothing. Director Howard Hawks wasn't just making another cowboy flick. He wanted to craft an American epic, an Old Testament of the West, where fathers and sons clash over land, loyalty, and destiny. John Wayne's Tom Dunson is no cuddly cowboy. He's part tyrant, part tragic hero, and all alpha. When he leads his first great cattle drive north on the Chisholm Trail, it's more like Moses in the wilderness than a simple adventure story. But this isn't Wayne's show alone. Enter Montgomery Clift, young, intense, all method acting and quiet defiance, as Matt Garth, Dunson's adopted son. The chemistry between Wayne and Clift is volatile, Old school brawn versus new school psychology. Their generational duel, Dunson's hardline authority against Matt's moral compass, turns the drive into a full-on Greek tragedy. Hawks piles on the tension, the hardships, the betrayals, and by the final act, it's a Western crossed with King Lear. John Ford famously told Wayne after seeing Red River, "I never knew the big son of a bitch could act." And he was right. Wayne's performance here is his most complicated, filled with pride, rage, and the ache of a man who's built everything but can't control the people he loves. The film's finale, an explosive, almost operatic showdown, remains one of the most cathartic in Western cinema. Red River showed that Westerns could tackle ambition, generational conflict, and the price of greatness. It's not just about the trail, it's about the scars you collect getting there. The Oxbow Incident, 1943. It takes a special kind of Western to make your blood run cold, and the Oxbow Incident is just that, a chilling meditation on justice, mob rule, and the dark side of human nature. Director William Wellman wasn't interested in sunsets and cattle drives. He wanted to put the American conscience on trial. The plot is disarmingly simple. Two drifters, played by Henry Fonda and Harry Morgan, wander into a Nevada town just as word spreads of a local rancher's murder. Before reason has a chance to draw breath, a lynch mob forms, fueled by fear, anger, and the terrifying comfort of groupthink. What follows is an hour and 15 minutes of escalating dread. The posse, intoxicated by its own sense of righteousness, rides out to mete out justice. But everything about the process feels wrong, too fast, too furious, and too eager to ignore facts for the sake of vengeance. Fonda's character tries to plead for patience, but his voice is drowned in the crowd's frenzy. The film doesn't flinch. It stares straight at the consequences of moral cowardice and collective violence. Based on Walter Van Tilburg Clark's novel, The Oxbow Incident was a box office gamble, and studios hated its grim message. No heroic shootout, no rousing score, just a gut punch of reality. Yet, over time, critics recognized it as a masterpiece of American cinema. Its claustrophobic tension and raw emotion have never aged. Today, it's studied in ethics classes as much as film schools. The final scene, letters read aloud to a silent, shamed crowd, hits harder than any gunshot. This isn't a Western about heroes. It's about what happens when decent people stand by and let decency die. Shane, 1953. There's something mythic about the silhouette of a lone rider against the Grand Tetons, and no film captured that myth like Shane. George Stevens directs with a painter's eye, framing every shot with an aching sense of beauty and foreboding. Into this idyllic Wyoming valley comes Alan Ladd's Shane, a gunfighter trying to bury his violent past and find peace among homesteaders fighting for their land. The plot might sound familiar: settlers versus a ruthless cattle baron, innocent families caught in the crossfire. But Shane transforms the formula into pure American folklore. What sets it apart is the way the story is told, through the eyes of young Joey, who idolizes Shane with a boy's unfiltered adoration. Shane's every gesture, every hint of sorrow or restraint, is magnified through Joey's gaze until he becomes more legend than man. Yet, the film never lets us forget that violence leaves scars on men, on families, on entire landscapes. When the inevitable showdown comes, Stevens makes sure it's messy, shocking, and painfully real. Gunshots echo like thunder, and death is never glamorous. Shane swept audiences into theaters and critics into rapture. Its influence is everywhere, from Eastwood's Pale Rider to modern revisionist westerns. The ending, with Joey chasing after the wounded Shane, is burned into the collective memory of American film. "Come back, Shane!" he cries, and for a moment, everyone wanted him to. But the truth is, Shane can never stay. The world he leaves behind is forever changed. In the Western pantheon, no hero ever rode away more gracefully or left a deeper ache behind. Winchester's Ebony 3, 1950. When you talk about Winchesters and Ebony 3, you're talking about a Western that fired on all cylinders: story, innovation, and star power. This isn't just a tale of men and their guns. It's the odyssey of a single rifle as it passes through the hands of killers, thieves, and desperate dreamers in a post-Civil War America. Directed by Anthony Mann and starring James Stewart in a role that shattered his nice guy image, this film explodes the simple good versus evil formula. The plot kicks off with a shooting contest in Dodge City. Stewart's Lynn McAdam wins the legendary Winchester, only to have it stolen by his bitter rival. What follows is an episodic chase, with rifle trading owners through showdowns, Indian raids, and betrayals, a totem of violence and desire that pulls everyone into its orbit. Mann, working with cinematographer William Daniels, bathes the film in stark light and shadow, creating a world where morality is slippery and revenge is a currency. James Stewart, up to then known for boyish charm, dives into darkness here, haunted, relentless, nursing a vendetta that reveals itself only in the film's final moments. The supporting cast is a murderer's row. Shelley Winters as a saloon girl, Dan Duryea as a grinning psychopath, and Rock Hudson in early Native American drag. The film's tight pacing and layered storytelling set a new standard for adult westerns, inspiring a string of Mann-Stewart collaborations that would define the decade. Winchester 73 isn't just about a gun. It's about the way obsession and violence ripple through a nation's soul. It's a chase, a reckoning, and a warning, all fired from the barrel of a single rifle. In the Golden Age, few westerns ever shot straighter or left a deeper mark. High Noon, 1952. High Noon isn't just a western, it's a ticking time bomb in black and white, and every minute is agony. Gary Cooper's Will Kane stands in the center of a deserted street, his wedding band still warm on his finger, a marshal facing down fate at exactly 12 o'clock. The plot is stark. On his wedding day, Kane learns a killer he put away years ago is arriving on the noon train, hell-bent on revenge. He could run, and everyone, from his new Quaker bride, Grace Kelly, to the town's leading citizens, begs him to. Instead, Kane stays and seeks help. What he finds is silence, closed doors, and the shattering loneliness of a community paralyzed by fear. Director Fred Zinnemann shoots the film in real time. The clocks in the background are a constant reminder that doom is approaching. The tension builds not with shootouts, but with betrayals. A deputy who quits, a judge who flees, old friends who melt into the wallpaper. The haunting theme, "Do not forsake me, oh my darling," echoes through empty streets and empty hearts. High Noon was as controversial as it was celebrated. Some called it an allegory for the Hollywood blacklist. Others saw it as a rebuke to cowardice everywhere. Gary Cooper, stoic and weathered, won an Oscar for a performance that radiates moral torment. The final shootout is brutal and abrupt, but the real climax is in the silence that follows. In the end, Kane throws his badge in the dirt, and the message is clear. Heroism is lonely, and sometimes the greatest battles are fought with no one at your side. For decades, this film has been the gold standard for integrity on screen, and its shadow lingers over every Western that came after. The Gunfighter, 1950. The gunman's life is a trap, and no film captures that existential prison quite like The Gunfighter. Gregory Peck, mustache sharp and eyes haunted, plays Jimmy Ringo, a legendary fast draw with a price on his head and regret in his soul. The film opens in a saloon where Ringo's mere presence is enough to trigger trouble. He's weary of killing, desperate to reconnect with his estranged wife and see his son. But his reputation stalks him like a shadow. Every hot-headed kid wants to make a name by gunning down the fastest man alive. Director Henry King strips away the romance of gunfighting. There are no sweeping vistas, no noble duels, just claustrophobic interiors, suspicious faces, and the relentless ticking of Ringo's limited future. As he waits in the small town of Keishen, trying to negotiate a truce with the woman he loves, word spreads that he's in town. The tension mounts with every knock on the door, every stranger's glance. The sheriff, played by Millard Mitchell, understands Ringo's curse but is powerless to lift it. Critics praise The Gunfighter for its psychological realism and somber mood. There's no redemption for Ringo, only a brief, heartbreaking glimpse of what might have been. When violence inevitably finds him, it isn't glorious. It's sad, almost inevitable. The gunman's legend survives, but the man himself is lost to myth. Peck's performance is a masterclass in restrained agony. In the end, The Gunfighter stands as the genre's most sobering meditation on fame, fate, and the heavy burden of a quick draw. No one gets out clean, and the West is never lonelier. Fort Apache, 1948. When John Ford set out to make Ford Apache, he wasn't looking to glorify the cavalry or demonize the other. Instead, he built a powder keg of pride, culture clash, and institutional blindness, setting the tone for his later, more complex westerns. Henry Fonda stars as the rigid Lieutenant Colonel Owen Thursday, a by-the-book officer dispatched to the remote outpost of Fort Apache. He's joined by John Wayne's Captain Kirby York, a man who knows the land, the enemy, and the fine line between discipline and disaster. Thursday's arrogance is palpable. Dismissing the wisdom of his officers and the humanity of the Apache, he pushes for a reckless showdown that's doomed from the start. Ford crafts every frame with tension, parades, drills, uneasy silences in the officers' mess. But beneath the starched uniforms, the real battle is for respect between old-world military pride and the harsh truths of the frontier. The film's climax, a massacre born from Thursday's hubris, is shot with the weight of Greek tragedy. Ford refuses to let his hero off the hook. The survivors must spin a noble myth out of the disaster, cementing Thursday's legacy while erasing his fatal flaws. Critics at the time were divided. Some saw an anti-authoritarian message, others an apology for manifest destiny. Today, Fort Apache is hailed as the first of Ford's cavalry trilogy, a blueprint for the modern revisionist Western. The cost of pride, Ford insists, is always paid in blood. And sometimes, the West's greatest legends are built on the ruins of its biggest mistakes. She wore a yellow ribbon, 1949. If Stagecoach was Ford's baptism of the West, She wore a yellow ribbon is his elegy. John Wayne, aged beyond his years with gray hair and weathered face, plays Captain Nathan Brittles, a cavalry officer staring down forced retirement as the plains rumble with impending war. The setup is simple. One last patrol, one last chance to keep bloodshed at bay before hanging up the sword. But Ford paints it with a grandeur and melancholy that few westerns have matched. Shot in glorious technicolor by Winton C. Hoch, whose work won an Oscar. The film is a feast for the eyes. Storm-black skies, sunsets ablaze, columns of blue-clad soldiers marching against an endless horizon. Wayne gives one of his subtlest, most touching performances. Brittles isn't a lion in winter. He's a man trying to pass on wisdom to green recruits, to bridge the gap between a world dying and a world not yet born. The film is full of Fordian touches, soldiers bickering, comic relief that never quite masks looming tragedy, women who carry as much weight as the men. The West, in Ford's vision, is a place of ritual and memory. Every frame feels like the end of an era. The story moves at the pace of reflection, not action, but when the final patrol rides out, it's impossible not to feel the ache of goodbye. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon isn't about glory. It's about grace, dignity, and the bittersweet acceptance that even the greatest must ride into the sunset. This is the Western as a poem of loss, a sunset song for a vanishing world, and Wayne has never been more human. The Big Country, 1958. When William Wyler's The Big Country hit screens, audiences were treated to a Western that didn't just fill the frame, it overwhelmed it. This wasn't a dusty one-horse town. This was the West as mythic battleground, where every horizon promised conflict and every ego could fill a canyon. Gregory Peck plays Jim McKay, a mild-mannered sea captain who arrives in Texas to marry a rancher's daughter and immediately finds himself in the middle of a land feud so vicious, it makes the Hatfields and McCoys look polite. McKay is no gunslinger. He's quiet, stubborn, and dangerously honorable, refusing to play by the rules of toxic masculinity. In a world of swaggering men, Burl Ives' volcanic patriarch, Charlton Heston's loyal foreman, Charles Bickford's iron-fisted rival, McKay's restraint is mistaken for cowardice. But Wyler delights in flipping expectations. In one unforgettable sequence, McKay and Heston's character brawl privately for hours, proving themselves to each other but refusing to turn violence into spectacle. Wyler's eye for scale is legendary. Shot in sweeping technicolor, the film uses the vastness of the American landscape to dwarf its characters, reminding viewers that even the biggest personalities are ants in the real big country. Jerome Moras's score soars over it all, adding a sense of grandeur and melancholy to every showdown. The Big Country isn't about gunfights. It's about pride, dignity, and the slow, grinding work of peacemaking in a world addicted to violence. Gregory Peck's performance is a masterclass in understated strength, and the film's moral is a quiet thunderclap. True courage is often invisible. In a genre obsessed with loud men, The Big Country is a rare Western that celebrates the power of silence. 3:10 to Yuma, 1957. 3:10 to Yuma is a Western built on nothing but tension, tick, 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 until every nerve is frayed. Dan Evans, Van Heflin, a drought-stricken rancher, takes a desperate job. Guard the captured outlaw Ben Wade, Glenn Ford, and get him onto the 310 train to justice. The catch? Wade is charming, ruthless, and his gang is closing in with every passing minute. Most Western sprawl. This one is a pressure cooker, a film noir in spurs. Director Delmer Daves keeps the action tight and the moral boundaries razor thin. Evans is no hero. He's broke, scared, and outmatched. Wade, meanwhile, is so charismatic that you almost root for him to escape. Their battle is fought with words, mind games, and the slow grind of time. The townsfolk, so eager for justice at first, melt away when the danger becomes real, leaving Evans alone with his conscience and a gun. The film's black and white cinematography, with its claustrophobic interiors and storm-soaked skies, adds to the sense of doom. But the real suspense is psychological. Can a desperate man do the right thing when the cost is everything? Glenn Ford, usually the good guy, gives a performance of silky menace, while Van Heflin's worn dignity holds the film together. 3:10 to Yuma is often compared to High Noon, but it carves its own niche as a Western about temptation, weakness, and the thin line between law and chaos. The ending, sweaty and uncertain, leaves the audience holding its breath. In a world where good men are hard to find, sometimes even the best have to make a deal with the devil just to survive the day. Johnny Guitar, 1954. No Western has ever been stranger or more electric than Johnny Guitar. From the first moment Joan Crawford strides into frame as Vienna, the pistol-packing saloon owner with a steel glare and a blood-red blouse, you know you're in for something feverish. This is a Western where the war isn't just over land or cattle. It's personal, psychological, and unmistakably political. Director Nicholas Ray crafts a world on the verge of meltdown. Vienna's saloon stands isolated on a cliff, a beacon for outcasts and a threat to the puritanical townsfolk led by Mercedes McCambridge's Emma, one of the most chilling villains in movie history. The tension is pure dynamite. Crawford and McCambridge hated each other off-screen, and their rivalry burns through every line of dialogue. Enter Sterling Hayden as Johnny Guitar, a drifter with a mysterious past and a deep connection to Vienna. But he's not the hero here. This is Crawford's film, all the way. Every set piece, the burning saloon, the bitter showdowns, the wild reversals of power, is heightened by Ray's Technicolor palette and off-kilter compositions. Beneath the surface, the film seethes with subtext: hysteria, gender roles, the Red Scare, and the danger of mobs. Johnny Guitar was dismissed as camp when it premiered, but time has revealed its raw genius. Today it's a cult classic, a Western that feels more like a fever dream or a powder keg of pent-up rage. Crawford's Vienna is both icon and outcast, and when she finally faces down the mob, it's less a gunfight than a reckoning. This is the Western as psychological opera, lurid, haunting, and unforgettable. Broken Arrow, 1950. Broken Arrow wasn't just a Western, it was a thunderclap in the way Hollywood portrayed Native Americans. In 1950, audiences expected Indians to be faceless threats. Then James Stewart's Tom Jeffords appeared on screen, ready to negotiate peace, not war, with the legendary Apache chief Cochise, Jeff Chandler. The film's premise is radical for its time. Jeffords, a former scout, witnesses the endless cycle of violence between settlers and the Apache. Instead of reaching for his gun, he reaches for understanding. Director Delmer Daves based his film on real events, taking pains to portray Cochise as wise, honorable, and every bit as complex as his white counterpart. The movie traces Jeffords' journey into Apache territory, where suspicion gives way to respect, and even love, as he falls for a young Apache woman. The union is doomed, of course, but the message is clear. Peace is possible, but it's fragile and built on the courage to see your enemy as human. Hollywood took notice. Broken Arrow earned critical acclaim and helped launch a wave of so-called pro-Indian westerns, but it was also accused of naivety and white saviorism. Still, Stewart's restrained performance and Chandler's dignified coachise broke new ground, earning Oscar nominations and forcing audiences to reconsider old prejudices. The film isn't perfect. Many Apache characters are played by white actors, a standard failing of the era, but its intentions are sincere. Broken Arrow stands as a landmark, a western that tried to heal old wounds instead of exploiting them. In the story of the American West, this film is the rare gun that fires a peace offering. Destry Rides Again, 1939. In a year already stuffed with classics, Destry Rides Again slipped in like a wild card and reshaped the western by letting its hair down. Universal gambled on James Stewart, then more known for earnest charm than six-shooter swagger, as the titular Destry, a deputy who doesn't believe in guns. When the corrupt town of Bottleneck loses another sheriff to the Undertaker, Destry is called in to restore order. But instead of blasting his way to justice, he disarms with wit and a knack for outfoxing outlaws. What really made jaws drop was Marlene Dietrich as Frenchie, the sultry saloon singer who rules Bottleneck with a whip and a wink. Dietrich, in her American comeback, stomps through "See What the Boys in the Back Room Will Have," turning every lyric into a double dare. The chemistry between her and Stewart is electric, subverting the usual tough guy, helpless damsel dynamic. When violence finally erupts, it's Frenchie who grabs a gun to save Destry, flipping the genre's gender rules on their head. Director George Marshall masterfully blends slapstick, satire, and real menace. There are barroom brawls that look like circus acts, but also moments of genuine peril. No one expected a comedy to end with such shocking sacrifice. Critics were stunned. Could a Western be funny and deadly serious? The answer, resounding, was yes. Destry Rides Again paved the way for every genre-bending Western to follow, from Cat Ballou to Blazing Saddles. Stewart's reluctant lawman became a new kind of hero, one who wins with brains as often as bullets. In Bottleneck, the punchline packs as much wallop as the punch-out, and the legend rides on. Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957. If ever there was a Western that felt like a campfire legend brought to roaring, Technicolor life, it's Gunfight at the OK Corral. Director John Sturges doesn't just tell the story of the West's most famous showdown. He builds it up with the swagger of a grand opera. Burt Lancaster, broad-shouldered and iron-jawed, steps into the boots of Wyatt Earp, the marshal who aims to clean up Tombstone. Kirk Douglas is his haunted, dangerous ally. Doc Holliday, a gambler, a killer, and a man with a death wish. This is a film that knows it's myth-making. Frankie Lane belts out a theme song so bold it borders on parody, narrating every turn in the action. But the heart of the film isn't in the bullets. It's in the tension between Earp and Holliday, two men walking toward destiny with nothing left to lose. Sturges milks every dramatic beat bar room standoffs, silent nods, and the shadowy tension before the infamous 30-second gunfight that will echo through pop culture forever. Unlike later revisionist westerns, Gunfight at the OK Corral leans hard into the legend. The historical facts are fuzzy, never mind. The drama's real. Lancaster and Douglas spark off each other, their friendship forged in violence and loyalty, doomed by circumstance. When the dust settles on Tombstone's streets, there are no clean victories, only the knowledge that violence writes its own history. The film was a box office smash, setting the stage for the even more existential hour of the gun. Critics may quibble about its accuracy, but for sheer spectacle and mythic energy, this gunfight still sets the standard. Some legends, it turns out, never die. They just reload. Bend of the River, 1952. By the early 1950s, the Western was looking for deeper shadows, and Anthony Mann knew just how to find them. Bend of the River teams. Mann with James Stewart for the second time, and the result is a Western where the land is as treacherous as the people who cross it. Stewart plays Glenn McClintock, a former border raider with a bloody past. He's desperate to escape. Hired to guide a wagon train of settlers to Oregon, he's surrounded by suspicion. Even the people he's helping wonder if he can really change. As the journey grows more perilous, McClintock faces betrayal not from strangers, but from his own all-eyes. Arthur Kennedy, all coiled energy and shifting loyalties, is a fellow outcast whose friendship sours into rivalry. When gold fever hits the region, greed spreads like wildfire. The settlers, desperate and hungry, become as dangerous as the bandits and claim jumpers lurking in the forests. Man's direction is merciless. Rivers flood, avalanches tumble, and every choice feels weighted by the cost of survival. Stewart's performance is raw and urgent, a man on the knife edge between violence and virtue. The Oregon wilderness, lush and threatening, becomes a character all its own. Bend of the River was a hit with audiences and set a template for the psychological Western. Mann's collaboration with Stewart would redefine the genre for the next decade, digging into the scars and secrets that drive men west. In the end, redemption isn't won by a single act, but earned through hard, often ugly choices. In this country, nobody comes out clean, but some men do come out better. The Far Country, 1954. Few Westerns are as chilly or as quietly merciless as Anthony Mann's The Far Country. Set against the icy expanse of the Yukon during the Klondike Gold Rush, the film trades sun-baked deserts for snowdrifts and frozen rivers. James Stewart, in the third of his hard-edged man westerns, plays Jeff Webster, a loner with a cattle herd, a stubborn code of honor, and a talent for keeping trouble at arm's length. But in the lawless boomtown of Skagway, trouble finds him. John McIntyre's Judge Gannon is a villain in a velvet hat, smooth, corrupt, and running the town as his personal fiefdom. Stewart's Webster is drawn into a web of alliances and betrayals. Partners turn on each other. Greed poisons friendships, and the gold itself seems cursed. Mann's Yukon is a landscape of isolation, where even the good people are desperate enough to bend the rules. Ruth Roman and Corinne Calvé add intrigue and temptation, but Stewart is always at the icy center, masking pain with a tight smile and quick draw. The film's climactic shootout, silent, brutal, and eerily beautiful, feels inevitable. The Far Country is more than a Western. It's a parable about what happens when civilization is just a thin coat of frost over raw ambition. Stewart's anti-hero doesn't win the town. He survives it, leaving behind a trail of broken dreams. In the Far Country, the West is as cold as it is wild, and the only justice is the kind you make yourself. Vera Cruz, 1954. Vera Cruz is a Western that never sits still. It's a high-octane blend of greed, violence, and double-dealing, set not on the American frontier, but in the chaos of Mexico's 1860s revolution. Burt Lancaster and Gary Cooper headline as Ben Train, an embittered Southern gentleman, and Joe Aaron, a grinning mercenary with a mouthful of gold teeth. Hired to escort a countess across the war-torn landscape, they are promised a king's ransom in gold, and neither has the faintest intention of playing it straight. Director Robert Aldrich paints with bold strokes. Bullets fly, allegiances shift, and every handshake hides a knife. Lancaster is wild and feral, all swagger and laughter, while Cooper is stoic but steely, a fading remnant of old-school honor in a world gone mad. The violence is ramped up for the era, and the cynicism, everyone's out for themselves, feels almost modern. Vera Cruz is famous for its moral ambiguity. There are no white hats here, only survivors and schemers. The Mexican setting allows for bigger set pieces, grand betrayals, and, for 1954, a shocking level of brutality. It's said the film directly inspired Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, and you can see the DNA of the good, the bad, and the ugly in every double-cross and squint-eyed stare. A box office success, Vera Cruz proved the Western could be sexy, dangerous, and immoral without losing its soul. It's a last wild ride before the genre would be reinvented by the Italians. In the end, the only thing certain is that no one gets the gold without getting their hands dirty. From legends who rode into the sunset to outlaws who changed Hollywood forever, these Westerns still shape the way we see courage and chaos on the frontier. Which film would you defend at high noon, and which one would you leave behind in the dust? Drop your pick in the comments, subscribe for more stories that rewrite movie history, and share with a fellow film buff. The West is full of surprises, so what story should we saddle up for next?